First off, we're not used to having them partially set things up for us, so we had to fill these pieces in. When I did this 66 was the circumference. I divided by 3.14, and I found out my diameter was 21. But when I come over here, it said Carlos needed 4 more feet than the diameter. So I had to take that 21 plus 4 to get 25 feet of rope. Okay, question? No. This was the circumference. I can't add the 4 feet until I find out how much the circumference actually is. Okay? So when I add that 4 feet, I get 25 feet of rope. And it said the rope was going to be 45 cents per foot. So I took 25 times 0.45 and got 11.25. By the way, this is an approximate cost. You might have had 24 point something. You might have had 25 point something. That would have been okay. But if the rope is sold by the foot and you can't get a part of a foot, if it came out to 25.01, how many feet would I have to buy? I'd have to buy 26. Okay? So anything between probably 24.5 feet and 26 feet, depending on how you interpreted this problem, certainly would be acceptable when you came down to this answer. Mm-hmm. Okay. In problems 7 through 9, they did say round to the nearest hundredth. That's what they said, so that's why you see 2 decimal places here. If you were doing that on a test and it was a 6-point problem, you'd probably lose 1 point because you didn't round properly. If they tell you where to round to, and again, if it were on the FSA, they told you to round to the nearest hundredth, and you didn't round to the nearest hundredth, how many points are you going to get for it? 0. They're going to count it wrong. So it's important that we start paying attention to those instructional pieces, that we are rounding the way they're telling us to round. Okay? Anything else from 6 through 10 that you'd like to cover? Yes? Number 9C. In number 9, they actually gave us this number. They said the diameter was 3.4. Okay? Circumference is equal to pi times d. With that being said, if the circumference is equal to pi times d, I'm going to take 3.14 times 3.4. And that's just something I punched into the calculator to get 10.68. When I multiply 3.14 times 3.4, it actually gave me this, 10.676. If I round to the nearest hundredth, I'm going to keep 2 places. This 6 is going to make this round up to an 8. Okay? Any other questions from 6 through 9? There is 11 through 14. 22 over 7. If I use circumference equals pi d, if the diameter is 35 and I use 22 over 7 instead of 3.14, how many times does 7 go into 35? 5 times. And when I multiply 5 times 22, I get exactly 110. And it'd be 110 inches. And again, if you use 3.14, you are going to end up with something a little bit different. And I wouldn't take off for it unless I told you specifically to use what? 22 over 7. Then I would take off for it. On the FSA, they can't take off for you using 3.14 or 22/7 interchangeably unless they tell you specifically to use one or the other. And they do that. They'll say use 3.14 for pi, or they'll say use 22/7 for pi. Okay? Anything else from 11 through 14? 12. And what did you end up with for an answer? Can I ask? Anywhere near 352? No. Okay. Again, this is one where I would have said the circumference is equal to 2 pi r. How do you use 2? I would have used 22/7 because 56 is divisible by 7. How many times will 7 go into 56? 8. So I cross this out. I make this an 8. 2 times 22 is 44. 44 times 8 is 352, and it would be centimeters. Okay?
So, I'm trying to get the whole 22/7 thing. So, you put the 2 there. It's for the radius?
Right, because if it's a radius, I've got to take 2 pi r. If it's a diameter, I don't have to do 2 pi r. I'm just doing what? Pi times d. It has nothing to do with the 22/7. The only reason I chose 22/7 is this number, which is a diameter, happens to be a multiple of 7. This number, which is a radius, happens to be a multiple of 7. If the radius or the diameter is a multiple of 7, what number is easier to use? 22/7 is easier to use than 3.14. And in fact, it's a little bit more accurate. That help? We good? There's 15 through 17. In problem 19, it says the Ferris wheel shown makes 12 revolutions per ride. In other words, when you get on it, if you start at the bottom, you're going to make a total of 12 trips around this. From here, all the way around back to here, is the circumference. And circumference is pi d. That's the distance you're going to travel if you're riding in that Ferris wheel in one revolution. But how many revolutions am I going to make? I'm going to make 12. Again, this is another one of those times when I looked at this number. This diameter is what? 63. Is 63 a multiple of 7? Yes. So I'm going to use 22/7 for my pi times my diameter, which is 63. How many times will 7 go into 63? 9. And when I take 22 times 9, I find out that in one revolution, I've traveled 198 feet. But how many revolutions am I going to make? 12. So I've got to multiply this by 12, which is going to give me 2,376. If by chance you use 3.14, your number is going to be a little bit off of that, right? Which is probably why you ended up being 3 units off. And the more revolutions it made, the further our numbers would get apart. Anything else from this page? There's 20 and 21. Okay. Number 20 says the diameter of a bicycle wheel. What shape are bicycle wheels? They're circular. It said the diameter is 2 feet. So if the diameter is 2 feet, then the distance all the way around, or the circumference, is going to be pi times d, or 3.14 times 2, which would be a total of 6.28 feet. They said they want to know how many revolutions it makes to go 2 kilometers. They gave me how many feet is in 1 kilometer. So if I multiply this by 2, I'd get 6,560 feet in 2 kilometers. So I take that 6,560 feet, I divide it by 6.28 to find out how many times that's going to have to turn, and it would be approximately 1,044.59. If I take 6,560 divided by 6.28, it's going to tell me that it's going to take approximately 1,045 revolutions to go 2 kilometers. Number 21, a map of a public park shows a circular pond. It says you're going to walk across the bridge. So you're going to walk the diameter, which is 0.25 miles. It says your friend is going to start where you did, but they're going to go around this way to get to the same point and meet you. Okay? Did they go all the way around the circle? How far did they go around the circle? So if the circumference is equal to pi d, then half of the circumference is pi d divided by 2. So I'm going to take 3.14 times 0.25, and I'm going to divide it by 2. 3.14 times 0.25 divided by 2. The distance on this outside is about 0.3925 miles. But they wanted to know how much further they walked than you did, so I have to subtract that 0.25 from it. And it came out to this, 0.1425, and they rounded to the nearest what? 100, 0.14 miles. Okay? Today we are going to talk about the area of a circle. Again, this is very simple. It's formula driven. You need to know the formula. Area equals pi r squared, which we know isn't right because pi is round. Okay?
But we can make square pies. I eat square pies for Thanksgiving. So I never ate a pie squared. Where would you find a pie squared? A square pie.
Okay, we're not going to go back into the square pi thing. So, it is just a formula. When you're squaring a number, what does it mean that you're doing? Multiplying it by itself. Okay? So if you look at your turn, number 4. A circular pool has a radius of 10 feet. They told me R equals 10. It's saying what is the area of the surface of the water of the pool. So if the radius is 10, the area is equal to 3.14 times 10 squared. What is 10 squared? 100. So I'm taking 3.14 times 100. And 3.14 times 100 would be 314. This would be feet what? Squared. And again, it's squared because today we're talking about what? Area. Okay? It is formula driven. Area equals pi r squared. When would I want to use 22 over 7 versus 3.14? If the radius or the diameter is a multiple of 7. It's going to still be easier to use that as a result. Okay? Everybody good with the first one? Listen, we can't forget what we talked about yesterday. Circumference is equal to what? 2 pi r, or what? Or pi d. I'm going to tell you that this one is the one we're going to use most today, because I need to find what? A radius, not the diameter, to calculate area. There you go. Good? Am I good? Can I go on? Okay. Okay. I want you to notice something that this says. This one says, give your answers in terms of what? Pi. In other words, they don't want you to take the pi out of the answer. Leave the symbol there. Don't replace it with 3.14. Don't replace it with 22 over 7. Leave it alone, just like you'd leave an x alone that you didn't know the value of. The reason for leaving pi in an equation is if I leave pi as a symbol, then it's always exact. Because pi in itself it's as exact as I can get it. I know what it represents. But if I replace it with 3.14, I've dropped a lot of decimal points off of pi. If I were making 1,000,000 widgets and I used 3.14 instead of a lot more decimal places, I'd be short of material when I went to make them. So you sometimes want to leave pi in the answer so that whoever is using the end results of your number has a more accurate value to work with. They can determine how many decimal places do I need to keep to make my answer valid and accurate for what my purpose is. So, here they gave me the circumference is equal to pi over 2. And they asked me to find what? The area. I know the area is equal to pi r squared. So the only thing I need to be able to calculate the area is what? The radius. Circumference is equal to 2 pi r. What can I replace this c with? Pi over 2. If I want to solve this for r, how would I get r by itself? Not divide by r, but divide by what? Not just pi, but what? 2 what? 2 pi. Don't make this harder than it is. Okay? This really, if you think of it, it's a fraction being divided by a fraction. This is pi over 2. We'd change it, we'd flip it, and this would become 1 over 2 pi. What would happen to the pi's? And what is 1 times 1 is? 2 times 2 is? What's my radius? 1/4. Okay? How would I find my area? Pi times 1/4 squared, which means I'm taking 1/4 times 1/4. 1/16 pi. Or you could think of it as being pi over 16. Notice that when I did this division, and I picked one of the harder ones because this was fractional. But when I did this division, really all I ended up doing was putting this along with this 2 in the denominator. Does everybody see that? Everybody good with this problem? Understand what I did? Sometimes they're going to give you the circumference, and you've got to find a radius. Sometimes they're going to ask you to leave pi in my answer. In other words, they don't want me to replace it with 22/7 or 3.14. Questions? Assignment. Is that the one I did for you? Oh, you don't have to do it on page 1. Yeah, you can do it. Oh, the top one. You're talking about the top number 5? No, start with the guided practice. First thing I've got to find is what in this problem. They gave me the diameter.
There.
If the diameter is 14, then the radius is 7.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So, with that, I'm going to use the formula. A equals pi r squared. They told me what value to use for pi. They said use what? So I'm going to do 3.14 times 7 times 7, because that's what 7 squared is. Right? 7 times 7 is 49 times 3.14. That's all you're doing.
I'm still a little confused on what you just did.
What's the radius?
7.
Area equals pi r squared. 3.14 times 7 times 7. Because r squared means that I've got to multiply it by itself.
Wouldn't I just find pi times r and then put square in?
If you have this, yes, but are you going to have necessarily this type of calculator? No. So you're really doing this. 3.14 times 7 times 7. That one I don't have to find the radius. They already gave it to me. This is easy. Because the radius is what?
12.
12. So it'd be 3.14 times 12. I haven't done it, but it'd be 49 times 3.14. 153.86. Yep. Not hard. Really? Did you take any notes today?
I didn't take notes, but I was paying attention.
Oh.
It was kind of confusing
Because that's number 9.
well, I didn't feel
But
I don't want to write down the answer just because I know the answer. I want to understand it better.
Okay. Circumference equals 2 pi r. That's the formula. But they told me my circumference was what? Not 2, but pi over 2. So where this is, I'm going to replace it with pi over 2. And I'm going to solve for what? I want to find the value of r. If I'm solving for r, what's happening to it? Being multiplied, right? What's the opposite of multiplication? This is a complex fraction. When you're dealing with a complex fraction, you keep the numerator, you change division to, and you flip the denominator.
But I'm trying to figure out how you got the 1.
What do you mean the 1? Because this is 2 pi over what?
1. Okay.
So I flipped it. 1 over 2 pi. What happens to my pi? What's 1 times 1? What's 2 times 2? So, my radius is what? My radius is 1/4. My area then is this, pi r squared. So it's pi times 1/4 times 1/4. What is 1/16 pi?
That makes it easier to understand.
Dad, do this one.
It would be 144 times 3.14. Should have been, no. Why did you change that to 24?
Because
This is the radius. And you've got to use the radius in the formula. You don't need the diameter. So you should have just done 12 times 12, not 24 times 24.
Oh,
They gave you the radius. That makes that easy.
oh, so you don't need the diameter.
I never need the diameter for area.
Okay.
I only can use the diameter if I'm looking for circumference.
I'm still very